Hello friends, and welcome to the Hanged Man in the Moon. I've decided to do a spin-off series from my usual Hanged Man in the Moon videos. As you know, if you're a returning visitor, you know that once a week I do a large spread that delves into ideas related to living the intentional life. And often at the end of those videos, I or we are left with a question. And so I've decided to take one of those questions after I do the larger video and do a shorter video trying to answer one small question. And I will be using Tarot de Marseille for this series. I'm doing that because in addition to Rider-Waite-Smith style decks and oracle cards, I've also developed a passion for Tarot de Marseille, and I thought this would be a great way to implement and to practice using my Tarot de Marseille skills. So that's what we're going to do. I've taken a question from the last video. The last video, if you have not seen it, I think the title is The Eternal Now. And so I'll put a card up here at the top. If you haven't seen that video, you might want to check that one out first, because this question springs from that video. So what I will do is first tell you the question. The question is, how do we balance sacred and profane knowledge? How do we balance our sacred and profane knowledge? And that comes from the last bit of the previous video. Sacred knowledge, the knowledge that we have from our non-physical selves, from the eternalness that we are, and profane knowledge. Now, profane is not like the F-bomb, that kind of profane, not swearing, but the profane being opposite of the other end of the spectrum from sacred. Sacred, spiritual, profane, material, day-to-day, secular. So we have secular or physical knowledge that we gain in these bodies, and then we have sacred and spiritual knowledge that we have from the unconscious and from the eternal nature that we are. So how do we balance these two areas of knowledge in our lives? So I've got a small 3-card spread pulled answering that question, and let me show you. You can see that I'm using one of my favorite knockaround decks. It comes in a tin, and it's always in my bag. This is the Tarot de Marseille, and I'll put a link in the description box below if you want to get this for yourself. It's inexpensive. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon or any online bookstore. So, you saw the 3 cards I pulled from this deck, and I was honestly a little bit unsure about how this would go before I did the drawing, and then after I laid the spread, I was still unsure about what the heck I was doing. But then I sat with it for a moment. And what did you see? You saw we had the 10 of Wands upright, we had the Ace of Wands reversed, and then we have the Knight of Swords, the Chevalier d'Épée, upright. And this was interesting. This is interesting. I asked about how do we balance our knowledge, and what I got was passion and fire, right? So, 10 of Wands. We got the 10 and the Ace, and I think these are these two are linked together very clearly. And then we got the Ideal coming in on the Knight of Épée. 10 of Wands. Accomplishment. Completed journey, completed projects, completed actions, and also it could be the rest after having completed something. So we've got the 10s, the completion cards, right? And completion of passions, completion of creativity. And then right next to it, we have the Ace of Wands, which would have been nice if it had been upright, but it's not. It's upside down. It's reversed. Now we've got creative blocks, perhaps, negativity. loss of energy. And I don't know if you have experienced this, but sometimes when I finish a project, when I've come to a point of completion, when something feels like it is finished, I get that moment or period of that, okay, I need to take a break, I need to take a rest, but the new thing has not started yet. Now, the new inspired action has not started yet. I haven't got the next thing begun yet. So there's that period which can sometimes feel like a creative block, a creative void, and some negative feelings and resistant feelings can spring up in that period as well. Because there's sometimes, I don't know if you noticed this for yourself, but there's a journey. You finish something, you go, oh, okay, that's done. And you take a break. You take a break and then you think, so what am I going to do next? And then you realize you don't really know what you're going to do next. And then as you realize you don't really know what you're going to do next, you start thinking, oh no, what if I don't know? What if that next thing never really comes? What if there's not a next thing? And you start getting a little bit negative about all of that. Now, sometimes there's that journey before that next thing actually appears. Have you noticed that for yourself? I think it's in that gap that we're finding the answer to balancing the sacred knowledge, which is often a non-verbal knowledge. Yeah? It's a knowledge of the eternal nature of us, which is before, after, and during this human experience, but it's not an experience that is expressed in things like English or French or Swahili or Korean or any other human language. It's not a knowledge that's expressed in words or even images. It's a knowing. It's a holistic knowing that we often consider intuition. Yeah, it's the knowledge of the unconscious. And then we have the knowledge of the conscious mind, the profane mind, the mind of the everyday. Yeah, the mind about money and cash and work that we have to do, to-do lists, the mind of heartbreaks that we felt, the mind of hopes and dreams for the future. Now, all those thoughts about things that we express in words and human language, like English or Korean or Swahili or Spanish or Russian or another language. So those two minds are most felt, the tension between those two minds are perhaps the most felt in those gap times between the completion and the beginning, the end and the finish, or the beginning, the end and the beginning, the completion and the start. And into that gap rides the Knight of Swords. Knight of Swords can be many things, can be brash, can be a little bit intellectually violent, but it doesn't have to be. Now, a card of action. Now, this is mind in action. Perhaps impulsiveness, but impulsiveness is not always a negative thing. Yeah? An impulse. An idea that leaps forward and says, do this. Now, that kind of an impulse, that kind of physical, that thought that brings us up physically. I do this. It's the card of attempting to make a leap into the unknown and experimenting and with the intellect in the silence and emptiness of that gap. That's what the Knight of Épée, the Chevalier de Épée, the Knight of Swords, is coming to remind us of. ability to take the leap into the unknown. The unknown, which is that sacred, non-physical knowing that we have with the conscious mind. The experimental mind in the silence and emptiness of the void. So we've got the mind in the void. We've got action and impulsiveness coming from the mind. So what does that mean? What is it trying to tell us? It's trying to tell us that when we're in that gap, rather than trying to figure it out, trying to plan it out, trying to do the logical thing, perhaps the best thing is to leap into the void, to be in the void fully, to experiment within the void and see what impulses, what knowledge arises in the void into the conscious profane mind. Perhaps even taking action, following the physical knowledge. Now, you notice that I keep doing this with the Knight of Swords, because the mind expresses itself in physical form as well. Mind is not all up here in the brain. We have mind that runs through our entire body. We have two centers. Actually, we have three centers of mind, according to some people. According to me, we have the brain center, we have the heart center, and we have the gut center. Yeah, we have the vagus nerve, which links it all up. But mind resides in the entire body and beyond the body. Of course, we have the non-physical self that we are. But mind resides in all of this. And so that's all part of that profane wisdom, the physical wisdom. And sometimes the thought doesn't come in the mind, the thought comes in action. And then we notice that action, that impulse of mind in the body, and then we start analyzing it and figuring it out and seeing where that is going to lead us. And so in that gap, the Knight of Swords could be that physical, the somatic mind leaping forward with us, for us, attempting to make the leap into the unknown, being there with our, what did I call this? The profane mind in the sacred mind. So not balancing one side and the other, but balancing it as in an integration, bringing both together, bringing one into the other. Like the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, yeah, bringing them all in together, the alchemical action of integrating the two minds. I think that's what this is trying to remind me and us of, that how do we balance them? We balance them by integrating them, and in the gap of the silent moment, bringing them together and acting from the impulse that is created there, jumping into the unknown, and instead of worrying about it and when am I going to get there or when do I get out of it? All of those thoughts that we revolve around those gap moments. Yeah? Diving into it and leaping forward with it, from it. That's what that knight is, I think, trying to remind us of. That's how we balance both the sacred and profane, both the non-physical and the physical minds that we have, to exist in the gap and integrate those minds. That's the way to go. Does that make sense? If it does, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think. If it doesn't, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think. And hit the like button if you haven't already. This has been interesting for you and you'd like me to do more of these, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and hit the alarm bell. Share this with somebody who you think might get benefit from it. And again, comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And friends, now, as always, I wish you love, joy, well-being, and pure awareness. Thank you.